What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. GNAR is a fighter/tank champion that was released on August 18th in 2014. GNAR was designed by Riot JEKYLL, who was assisted by Riot Meddler, and when he came out he brought this unique playstyle of a transforming champion with the caveat that you were not able to control when you transformed, unlike other shapeshifters. He's an awesome champion, but GNAR as he is today wasn't always the GNAR that was going to be released. He had the possibility to be a lot different to what he is now. So join me today in taking a look back before his release, to find out what GNAR could have been. And I gotta say that this is another what could have been episode that I'm actually super excited to present, because I got the chance to talk to Riot JEKYLL, the lead designer for GNAR, and ask him a bunch of questions about GNAR's design. So some, but not all of the info in this video is essentially exclusive, and this will be the first time the public hears about it. So big props to our man Riot JEKYLL for being kind enough to share the information. And if you guys enjoyed the video, hit that like button, and if you don't enjoy the video, hit that dislike, since if this video hits 10,000 ratings, I'm gonna buy myself, actually, let's let you guys decide. Whatever the top rated comment is, I'll buy if this video gets 10,000 likes. Within reason, of course. And let's get started. GNAR's development began with Riot Meddler asking himself and the champion design team about this concept of transforming champions. They wanted to make a new transformed champion that felt good to play as, but also good to play against. At this point in time, the transformed champions in the game were either completely broken and as such were frustrating to play against, or were heavily underpowered, and as such were not fun to play as. And a large part of that was due to the mechanics of the way the transform was designed in those champions. They realized that they wanted someone who would have identifiable strengths and weaknesses in both forms. And the reason why that didn't exist in the other transformed champions was because you were able to just switch forms at will. So if a champion had a meaningful weakness in any given form, they could just switch to the other form and that weakness was gone instantly. So they came to the answer that they needed a transformed champion that did not allow you to decide when you switched forms, and that heavily limited concept of gameplay was what they wanted to design a champion around, and they went with that right from the start, and began to work on the character surrounding it. As for GNAR's backstory, it began with him being almost like a hermit kind of pilgrim. He was constantly wandering the world and exploring all alone by himself as a young Yordle after being frozen in ice for thousands of years and waking up to this new world. But he needed the tools to be able to survive the dangerous world on his own. So the idea that they came up with was like this man and monster style of transformation, akin to like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, or maybe Bruce Banner in the Hulk, where this innocent little creature would unwillingly and unknowingly transform into a monstrous one. They explored a bunch of different monsters for him to turn into. In one of his original versions, he turned into a much more traditional dinosaur, similar to like maybe a T-Rex, which is probably where the Dino GNAR skin was inspired from. In other forms, he transformed into a massive bear, and in another, this huge angry ox. Eventually they decided on the idea of more of like a gorilla-esque creature with a front-loaded body and enormous muscles and stuff. From there the team looked towards concept artists Edmundo Sanchez and Josh Singh, who drafted up this piece of concept art based on the idea that they had for the character. And based on that concept art, which the team loved, Riot designer Charles Liu developed these iterations for his in-game concepts, and the team began to work on developing a kit around this version of GNAR. As you can see, he uses a different weapon, and his color scheme is a lot more primate-esque to go along with the idea that they had of him being based off of the body type of a gorilla. The main goal with GNAR's gameplay was to have both forms be equally useful but in different ways, with each form being strong in certain clear-cut circumstances. And with that concept, they started by trying to make him a more accessible form-swapping champion that was a lot easier to pick up than some of the others, but difficult to master, as the existing transforming champions were considered difficult to learn for newer players. Right off the bat, they were sure of a few things. GNAR would not be able to use mana since his abilities could not be gated by mana when you already weren't able to decide when to transform. So the rage mechanic was the very first thing they designed for him. Originally, it generated rage a lot faster and more frequently, and then slower, and it went through a couple of iterations until they got the feel for it in terms of laning and team fights. So they had his rage mechanic, but in order to give his kit meaningful weaknesses and ensure that he puts himself in danger when playing aggressive, they needed to give him super short range. So originally, GNAR was actually a melee character, or I guess mini GNAR was actually a melee character. This Jawbone Club weapon had a melee basic attack in both Mini and Mega GNAR form, and his auto attack in both forms did negligible damage, with the trade-off of making his abilities a bit more powerful. And as a result of being melee in both forms, in his Mini form he was extremely fast, and had boatloads of movement speed, as a way to be slippery and elusive. However, although he did have a little bit of poke and some solid kiting ability, he performed poorly in skirmishes since his auto attack damage was mostly useless, regardless of which form he was in, and after seeing that version they knew it had to change. That was the moment that truly cemented the concept of Mini GNAR being this sustained damage with solid kiting form that was also super squishy, while Mega GNAR was this high impact super brawly form that was tanky, but also slow and kiteable. With those design concepts cemented, GNAR developed into this idea where each form had a much more concrete style from one another, and they figured out what his abilities would be a lot more, and the goal of him becoming easier to play became much more of a secondary goal and really just not that important, since they realized that they had to make him a much more complex and difficult champion if they wanted to accomplish their primary goal of limiting access to form swapping to create distinct and meaningful strengths and weaknesses in both forms. In order to accomplish that goal of accessibility though and making him a little bit easier to understand, they decided to make Mini and Mega GNAR share ability cooldowns. That way having 7 total abilities didn't really feel as overwhelming as the other transformed champions, since you would only ever have access to 4 at a time. And as well, they wanted to keep the abilities between the two forms mostly similar to make them similar to play. In a sense, GNAR's Q would always be a line skill shot regardless of his form, and his E would be a ground targeted leap regardless of his form as well. And that mechanic really brought a lot of fluidity to GNAR's kit and made the two forms feel really connected to one another, and opened up a lot of build diversity for him too in terms of items. The concept of sharing cooldowns between the two forms on the abilities while also having the abilities behave in similar ways, particularly the Q and the E, was this big aha moment in GNAR's design, and was the big factor that made them finally decide that GNAR was going to be a sure thing and would be brought to life. Originally, Mini GNAR had his own ultimate that was a separate ability from Mega GNAR's ultimate. I don't have the exact info on what the ultimate did though, but it was likely a disengage or maybe a kite tool that captured the mobile and agile playstyle of Mini GNAR. However, they decided against it, since Meddler felt that Mini GNAR and Mega GNAR having shared cooldowns on the ultimate was fairly counterintuitive, since his ultimate was something that you needed to have access to available on demand once you were in Mega GNAR. They didn't want the case of you having to wait out your Mega GNAR form in order to use the Mini GNAR ultimate. They needed him to have an ultimate that would always have relevance, since his transform time was already unreliable. They didn't also want to make his ultimate more unreliable on top of that. As well, Meddler decided that Mini GNAR didn't really need an ultimate to accomplish the goals that they had for his playstyle, so it was taken off of his kit. And at this point was when GNAR's design passed from Riot Meddler to Riot GYPSYLLD. Up until this point, Riot Meddler had been the sole design leader for GNAR, but he passed it over to work on other projects. And the first thing Riot GYPSYLLD did was change GNAR's weapon from the Jawbone Club into a boomerang, and gave him a ranged basic attack in the Mini GNAR form. By this point his character and story had been developed a bit further after changing his weapon, and his model had been pretty much cemented in its design, but the gameplay was still far from it, and it still had a lot more to go through. From there, his ultimate was also changed into an ability that you guys might actually know about, which went by the name of Devour. This ultimate ability would eat an enemy champion for 3 seconds upon targeting them, and it would remove them from the world for those 3 seconds. During this time you would not be able to move, but you could spit out the devoured enemy in any direction. Now this ability didn't work out for a few reasons. GYPSYLLD described this Devour ultimate for GNAR as feeling a lot like a discounted Skarner ultimate, or maybe like a discounted Fiddlestick Sphere, and as a result it was just unsatisfying to have as an ultimate, especially since it made the opponent you devoured invincible for the duration. As well, with the style that Mega GNAR's form was designed to portray, this Devour mechanic was more along the lines of like a ravenous wolf, rather than like a rampaging gorilla in a china shop kind of thing that they wanted to go for. GNAR needed to have an ultimate that would always have relevance and could have an immediate impact whenever it was available. Since his transform into Mega GNAR was already unreliable, it wasn't clean to make his ultimate in this Devour version unreliable as well. So this ultimate was scrapped, and after a few iterations was changed to the ultimate that he currently has now. And as I'm sure most of you probably know, this Devour ability would get stolen from GYPSYLLD and Riot Meddler by Riot Xenon for Tahm Kench. Xenon realized that on GNAR's kit this Devour mechanic completely had no place, but in order for the mechanic to work, and they did think it was really cool, they had to build the entire kit of the champion around it, which is what he aimed for when designing Tahm Kench, but that's a story for a different video. In addition, GNAR's W used to also be a lot more like Varus's W. It had a similar effect of applying stacks upon hitting your auto attacks on a target, and then once you stacked it up to 3 auto attacks, you would have to proc it using his boomerang, and then you would finally get the bonus movement speed, as well as the % max health bonus damage. And that ability didn't really work out because it was just clunky and unsatisfying, so they changed it to proc instantly, and to allow his other abilities to generate stacks as well in addition to his auto attacks. As well, another ability that went through a couple of road bumps during its design was GNAR's hop ability, his E. They knew that he was going to have some form of mobility, especially in his mini GNAR form right from the get-go. So the concept for his E was there from the start. However, in the early version of GNAR's kit, his hop ability was a lot more hoppy than it is now, in the sense that it actually had an unlimited amount of hops. So as long as you were actually landing on targets, you could bounce 5, 10, 15, 50, 100 times if you had enough things to actually bounce off of in the direction that you were hopping. It was a lot of fun when it worked, but it also felt super clunky since it was uncontrollable. Sometimes you would hop too far, it was unpredictable, and it was really just super crazy and unfair to play against. So it was toned down significantly to 1 bonus hop maximum. And after figuring out all of those things, GNAR's gameplay kit was fully fleshed out. JEKYLL did mention a bit about how GNAR had much less scrapped abilities compared to other champions, but I'm glad I was able to showcase pretty much all of them except for that one ultimate in mini GNAR form, rather than just the few major ones that we usually showcase in this type of video. And with those designs worked out, and after a few minor number tweaks, his gameplay kit had been fully completed to go along with his story, character, and personality. And with that, GNAR became this champion who was incredibly unique in that for the first time on any champion, you had to learn how to play during the transformations between forms, as well as learning how to play around the 2 different playstyles that his individual forms brought to the table. His kit was unique, complex, and had tons of depth, and it fit in quite nicely thematically with him being this prehistoric being that was almost out of place in the world, but also accomplished this monstrous beast and cute little goofball personality simultaneously. GNAR ended up becoming a pretty sweet champion, and although a lot of the versions he had during development were super awesome, there's no doubt that the design goals Riot JEKYLL and Riot Meddler had were quite successful, and GNAR was released to the public as a pretty sweet champion. And that's going to be it for me today. If you guys enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit that like button, and if you didn't hit that dislike, subscribe if you want more videos like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.